Dr. Olsen, we are honored that you're with us today, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I am really excited to be here to learn with you all today. Before we jump in to this topic, I do want to give some background on myself to give some context around this topic and why I'm presenting it. But before I do that, I do want to introduce our wonderful Seeds program manager, Miss Nafi Abdullahi. If she'll come off camera, she will, or come on camera, she'll be monitoring the chat and assisting with questions and discussions that we may have today. So thanks, Nafi, for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about the intricacies of change and using motivational interviewing techniques to guide others through that change. And these techniques, they're actually pretty dear to my heart because I've used them all throughout my career in multiple different settings, and I found a lot of great benefit. To give some background, I got my doctorate degree from Duke University in physical therapy. During that time, I learned all about listening and seeking to understand the patient's needs so that we can help guide them through what are often difficult behavior changes. I then, after I graduated, I practiced for a number of years as a physical therapist in the VA, and I got certified in motivational interviewing. And I found it was really beneficial as a physical therapist. As most of you probably know who have ever been to physical therapy, we don't do medications really, or surgeries or other interventions like that as physical therapists. We're often asking people to make activity changes, behavior modifications, to exercise, to do rehab, things like that. Those are things that require a whole lot of change and a whole lot of motivation to change. And it's not always easy to get people to do that. And so I really found that motivational interviewing techniques were very helpful in guiding people through change. So following that, I got the opportunity to serve as the Director of Learning and Development for the Eastern Colorado Healthcare System. And during that time, we implemented servant leadership training into the organization. And part of that training was using motivational interviewing techniques for leadership scenarios. And that training was honestly very well received and utilized, not only personally for me, but also as an organization. And that's a lot of where this training today comes from. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. The National Center of Organizational Development, they are part of VHA, and they developed a servant leadership MI lead training. And that is where I pulled a lot of the materials for today's presentation from. So really grateful for them and for all the work that they put into this. All right. So our course objectives today are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I'm just going to read through them. The first one is to describe the psychology of change and resistance. Second is recognize the underlying values that promote trust and collaboration. And then third is use motivational interviewing techniques to inspire motivation, reduce resistance to change efforts, and increase engagement. So like I said, these are pretty straightforward. I do want to note that we have, I hope you've seen our announcements and memos, but we have implemented a new structure to Seeds that starts here in January that we're really excited about. We'll talk more about this at the end of the session, but you'll have the opportunity to sign up for a small group intersession in January to dive deeper into these principles through application and practice. Whereas this intersession or this main session will just focus mainly on those first two objectives, that those intersessions will focus on that last objective of practicing those motivational interviewing techniques. All right, so quick overview of our agenda today, getting through all this introductory stuff. Today, we are going to spend most of the day in a lecture format to present the material and information. And then again, those intersessions will be focused more on application and practice of the principles. So we're going to start with the psychology of change and resistance. So we have a quote here that I'm sure you have all seen in some form or another. This quote is, "Remember that the only constant in life is change." I've seen this quote in many different situations and, reworded in many different ways, but I really like it because honestly, it's so true. While we often fight change, the truth is that no matter what team or organization you're a part of, there's always going to be change. That's the one constant. There will always be change happening. You're going to have times where you are on that receiving end of change, and you're going to have times when you're on the giving end of change. Sometimes you may agree with the change. Sometimes you won't agree with the change. And honestly, the key is not so much what the change is, but how. It's how the change is given. It's how it's received, how it's given that determines its success for the most part. Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule, but I would say that for the most part, it's that implementation of the change that is really important. So what I want to do is I want to do a little reflection activity to start. I want you to think about a time when a change needed to be made. This could be in your family, it could be in your organization, in your team, whatever it is. And you were the one who had to lead out through this change. You had to present the change, get everyone on board, and ensure the change was successfully implemented. Think about what were some of the things you did that helped it go smoothly and successfully. What principles or techniques did you utilize to successfully act as that change agent? So think about that for a moment, and then if some people could drop some answers in the chat, I would love to hear some of the things that you maybe did that you felt helped that change go smoothly and successfully. Right, I'm seeing becoming the biggest cheerleader for it, communication, letting employees know how the change will benefit them, showing proof of positive outcome from change, just being open to the change. I'm hearing a lot of very positive self-talk. It sounds like you've used lots of techniques that are very positive, trying to promote the positive aspects of this change. Build awareness and ensure people know what is expected. So that goes into the communication. Being transparent and honest. That shows a lot of that human side of change and that empathy that comes in with the fact that change is hard. Even if it's necessary, it's hard. Asking the team to voice fears and concerns and then validating concerns and addressing to ease those concerns. That to me sounds a lot like guiding through change. So well done, Kim. That's an excellent example. Acknowledging others being heard and appreciated. Yes, I love this. This is exactly what we're going to talk about today, is how to use this empathetic method to guide people through change. Use of visual aids, excellent. Helps with that communication. These are great. I'm loving this, and it shows that you have had experience successfully guiding people through change. And so we want to draw back on those experiences so that we can remember some of those principles that we used. Now we're going to switch gears, and I want you to think about another time when you were on the receiving side of change. So when you were expected to follow along with a proposed change, I want you to think about a time specifically where it didn't go very well. Maybe you felt some resistance, or the change initiative wasn't as successful as it could have been. Think about what made you resist, what made it not as successful as it could have been. Or what did the person leading the change do or not do that led to this less than ideal outcome? And same thing, think about it for a few minutes, and then let's put some answers in the chat. All right, they're coming in quick. Let's see if I can keep up with them. So too much work imposed on me. So it sounds like they weren't really listening to your concerns. Lack of listening, again, they weren't listening to your concerns and maybe how it would impact you. Was told to just do it with no explanation as to why or what to expect. So no communication there. It was a forceful change. You were being forced into that. No preparation, last minute notice. I'd say that's not really respecting the people who are having to implement the change. Lack of clarity, the rollout was a failure, lack of proper information, communication, ownership of the change. That's interesting. I'm seeing a lot that has to do with communication. It may not have necessarily been the wrong change. It could have been the right change that was needed, but it just wasn't communicated well. Not being allowed to voice concerns gives the perception that you're a number, not a person. Just do what you're told. Exactly. So it's almost kind of the opposite. You know, those things that led to that successful change, you do the opposite, and that's what made it not successful. What I do want to point out is a lot of these answers, they identify the psychology of change. It's often not the change that is the problem, but it's how it's presented and how it's implemented that leads to resistance and success or failure. So that's something that is so important and so key, and oftentimes it gets overlooked. We may have this big project that we worked so hard on to determine if it was the right thing to do, the right direction to move with the organization. And we spend so much time on the actual project management that we forget the change management. the human aspect of change, and that is often what can lead to that success or failure. All right, so going on, I want to talk a little bit more about change and resistance and how it's natural to resist change when we feel we're being forced into it. And the key there is to guide through change, not force through change. So you can see on that picture on the left, clearly this person is being forced through change. There's some things that we're seeing in this picture, right? He's being pushed. He's putting his arms back saying, whoa, I don't want to go this way. He's digging his heels in. Those are some signs that he's probably being forced into this change. And this can often happen through something that we call the righting reflex. I don't know if anyone has heard of this, but this is a concept that I really love because it's something I do a lot, and it's something I need to check myself on all the time. The righting reflex is when someone comes to you with a problem and you immediately give them the answer. And you're like, oh, I've dealt with this before. I know what the answer is here. You should do this. That's called the righting reflex. It's a reflex to right a wrong. And we don't necessarily always do it out of ill intent. We're doing it because honestly, we're good people and we want to help and we want to see good outcomes. But what can happen is when we exercise that righting reflex and we don't keep it in check, then people will feel that they are being forced through change, even if it was obvious and the right change in the first place. They will feel forced. And then there will be that resistance. There will be that digging in of heels and that holding back. Another way that we oftentimes force people through change is by pushing them through ambivalence. So ambivalence is kind of shown here on this picture on the right. We've all seen pictures before of the devil and the angel on the shoulder, right? Where you are trying to decide what decision you should make. In this situation, we could say the angel is promoting change talk and the devil is promoting sustained talk. The devil's saying, don't change. The angel's saying you should change. Oftentimes, when people are faced with a decision to change something or to stay the same, they have considered both sides. And they are on the fence trying to decide which way they want to go. And what we often do is we try to hurry them through it. We try to hurry them through that ambivalence and help them make that decision quicker. But what research has actually shown is that when you push someone towards one side, they will naturally start speaking the pros of the other side. And the more they speak the pros of the other side, the more likely they are to go to that other side. So when we try to force people into making one decision, we're actually hurting. And we're actually making it less likely that they will make that decision. What we can do is help people recognize the need for change and then help them come up with that internal motivation and that internal plan on their own to make the change. And when we can do that, when we can guide them through the change, that resistance decreases and their engagement increases. So now we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to talk about change and engagement. I just want to take a few minutes on this because I think this is a really important topic and talk about how change and engagement and how they play off each other. So we got a big picture here. There's a lot of stuff here. I want you to take a minute to look at everything on here and just digest it for a second because there's a lot of information on this picture about engagement. So what this picture represents is employee engagement within the Veterans Benefits Association administration. Whoops, my bad. This picture is actually accurate to 2024 AES data. So this data shows accurately what is happening within the VBA in terms of employee engagement. You can see that there are 39% in that blue that are engaged. And this would be based on self-reporting. So through the AES, the All-Employee Survey, people report whether they are engaged, mixed engagement, or disengaged through a variety of questions. So 39% reported that they were engaged, 39% reported mixed engagement, and 16% reported disengaged. And you can see comparatively to all industries, we're actually quite a bit better. They were at 33% engaged, 51 mixed, and 16 disengaged. So that's better, which is great. Compared to the VA average in 2024, we're slightly worse. They had a little bit more engaged, a little bit higher mixed engaged, and a little bit less disengaged, but not a huge change. So I want you to take a moment to reflect as you look at this boat. Where do you think you are right now? Where do you think different members of your team are? Have you been at all three spots at some point in your career? And why? What caused you to move maybe from engaged to mixed engaged, or from disengaged to engaged? What were different things that made you move in those areas? The ultimate goal of an organization is to have as many people shift to the left as possible. It's not possible to expect that we're going to have 100% engagement. But we can always strive to get more to that side. And the more you get to that side, the more progress we make as an organization. What I want you to think about now is, how does change affect this boat or this canoe, whatever we call it? Let's say you're leading this team and you presented a big sweeping change to a major process to be rolled out in a few months. How would those in the blue react? Throw some stuff in the chat. How would those in the blue react to a big change? Depends on how the change was presented. Yes, good point. Ask questions for buy-in. Yeah, so they might be interested and start asking questions so they can get buy-in. Likely say, I like the change, full steam ahead, positive. There you can see that they're moving forward. They've got the canoes. They are that engaged group. They're usually the ones that are more open to that change. They would think of how it will impact them and how they can prepare. Move to the right, they might. You're right. Depending on how it was implemented, they might move out of that engaged group. Now let's think about the orange group. How do you think the orange group is going to react to this big change? Here we go again. Yes. Also depends on how it was implemented. If you're confused, so just pay me. Orange will become red. Yeah. Oftentimes big changes will cause people in orange. Orange are those people that you really want to focus on. Oftentimes the engaged, they're pretty well driven no matter what's going to happen. The disengaged, they're pretty well not driven no matter what's going to happen. But that mixed engagement, they're the people that can shift to one side or the other. And so you really want to make sure you're implementing things well to prevent that shift to the right. I'm seeing apprehensive, agreeable, slower to accept changes, fearful, may need more buy-in. Now, what about the red? What type of behaviors, what things would we hear from the red? What's in it for me? Yep. Red has jumped ship. Yes. Negative comments. This is not going to help. Why me? Do whatever you want. Time to look somewhere else. I think one thing that's really interesting about the red is they've got that anchor. So not only are they not rowing forward, but they're actually trying to slow it down. And so oftentimes they can not just be not helping, but they're actually detrimental. So that's where it can, yeah, I'm just here to get my paycheck. How does this affect me? Exactly. So we've kind of already talked about this, but I want you to think about, and this one you can just reflect, how the distribution of groups in the boat would shift if you took a forceful approach to implementing this change. I think it's pretty obvious, right? It would probably shift to the right. We would get more disengaged, less engaged if we took a forceful approach. But if we took a guidance approach, how would it shift? Maybe some of the disengaged would stay disengaged because that's just where they're going to be. But maybe some of that mixed engagement would move to the engagement because they would feel more drawn in. They would have more buy-in to this change. The key here with all of this, and why I wanted to bring this aspect in, is that people at different levels of engagement are going to react to change differently. Change will also affect people's level of engagement. It may move them from one group to the other. So it's something that we want to consider. We want to take into account as we are implementing change. Where is this person at? And how could my implementation of this change affect their engagement? I'm going to emphasize the point one more time. When we try to force people through change, resistance increases and engagement decreases. When we guide people through change, resistance decreases and engagement increases. But the question is how do we do that? And what does that look like? So I'm going to provide here some pretty simple examples to see what I mean by guiding through change and forcing through change. I have a scenario here. I'll read it, and then I'm going to have Nafi read method 1 and method 2 on the next slide. We'll see if you all can think and can point out which is the guiding through change and which is the forcing through change. Okay. So the scenario, a supervisor of a team just learned from senior leaders that a new software tool is going to be implemented amongst all teams in the upcoming months. The old software has been used for over 15 years, and most people are very comfortable with it. This new software has some additional features not provided by the old software, although it is a completely new system that will take some getting used to. Every team is to designate a project lead for implementing this new software. The supervisor presents this change to the team member they designated as the project lead. And here's how the conversation goes. Nafi, go ahead.
So this is method 1. So after explaining the change, we have been given this task from senior leadership, and you have been designated as the lead for the project. This needs to be completed by the end of next month. Please create a project implementation plan by the end of next week. I will email you all the information about the project. Please let me know if you have any questions.
All right. So it sounds, pretty nice. I feel like I've probably done that multiple times to my team. Let's go to the next example. Yeah, Nafi can attest to that. So here's method 2. So Nafi, can you read that one?
So method 2, this is after explaining the change. So what do you understand about this change? What are some potential positive aspects of this project? What are some potential challenges that this project might bring out? Why do you think leadership has decided to implement this new software? Summarize and reflect back to what you heard. Based on what I've heard, I think you have the right mindset to be successful in leading this project. It's great. So it's a great push to help somebody want to do it. And then what specific steps will you take to get this project off the ground?
So Nafi, let me just ask. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Laura. Method 1, force. Method 2, engagement. So Nafi, can I ask you, in these two methods, what was some differences that you saw that kind of made that method 2 more of the guidance?
So I like that method 2 was more inviting, right? It wasn't forceful. I didn't feel like I was being forced. There were questions that could be asked. I also like I said, that bullet that says that I think you have the right mindset to successfully lead this project. I mean, just being put in that position to invite me to say that, hey, you would be a good person in this position would be great. In the first method, just being told what to do with no, I don't know, like it just seemed like there was no consideration as to what you might have on your schedule in terms of like what the ask is. So again, I agree with method 2, and some people already said it in the chat that it's the positive, it's the inviting, it's the engaged. Alicia, I like how you said that. That's what method 2 gives you, that inviting positive method.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. I love how you pointed out the part where it says, I think you have the right mindset. That's an affirmation. And giving people those affirmations can really help spark that change. I think it was pretty obvious which was the right one. But I want you to really think, how often do you do that method 1? Like how often do we just we got to get this out, we got to get this going. So I'm just gonna, say, hey, you've been designated as the project lead for this. Here's all the info. Let me know what questions you have. And really what that's going to do is, even though it seems like you're getting stuff done quick, this method 2 often takes a lot longer. Method 2 takes longer at the forefront, but you're not going to have as much resistance. And so in the long run, it's going to be faster. And Justin, I'm glad this has never happened to you. Maybe I'll have you lead one of the intercessions. All right. So like I said, these are pretty obvious examples, but how often do we use that one? So we're going to discuss those motivational interviewing techniques that were present within that method 2 in a minute. But before we do so, I want to share a quick entertaining video to really hammer in this point, and the pun was intended there.
It's just, there's all this pressure, And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on, if you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on?
All right, thank you. So that's one of my favorite videos. I absolutely love that video. It's very exaggerated, and yet we do this all the time in our life. Exactly. It's cute, but the point was made, right? How often have we been in a situation when the change is so clearly needed and it's so obvious, but it doesn't matter because the person is not in a place to hear the change and it's not being presented in the right way? It really doesn't matter how obvious the change is. It doesn't matter. It won't be successful if they are not in the right place to hear that change and if it's not being presented in the right way. So that key, again, is to guide others through necessary change to decrease resistance and increase engagement. And the tool that we can use to put this into practice is motivational interviewing. So this is where motivational interviewing comes in, a tool that moves us more towards that guidance through change instead of forcing through change. Motivational interviewing, for those who are not familiar with this strategy, it was developed by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick and is described as a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment for change. It was initially developed for clinical purposes for clinicians to use with patients, but it's actually been expanded to many different settings because it's been so effective. It's begun to be used as a tool to guide leaders in having effective conversations for situations such as engaging employees, guiding through personal or system change, or resolving conflict or discord. What motivational interviewing is essentially a set of tools or practices that can be used in conversations with others to help them identify their own personal motivation for making the change and then guiding them through that process of change. And that example that we read a few minutes ago that Nafi read, you'll see these different practices and tools that were present in that example. Before I share the 4 tools or practices, though, I do want to take a minute to talk about the heart of servant leadership. Because we're in the VA, we love our acronyms. The heart of servant leadership can be described as PACE, P-A-C-E, which is partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. And this is actually really critical for motivational interviewing. Understanding the heart of servant leadership is critical for successfully using these tools. These 4 values should always be the underlying motivation for using motivational interviewing. So I'm going to say that one more time. These 4 values should always be the underlying motivation for using motivational interviewing. We are all leaders at different times, even if we're not in formal supervisory positions. And when it comes to guiding someone through change, you are acting as a leader at that point. So by embodying the heart of servant leadership, it will help you guide through change as opposed to forcing through change. If these values, though, are not underlying your motivation and actions, then motivational interviewing can actually come across as manipulative as opposed to guiding. And you'll see what I mean as we get into the different tools. If you do not have these values at the heart of what you're doing, it can be very manipulative to do motivational interviewing. So let me, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to quickly go over what each of these 4 principles mean and what they look like. The first one's partnership. I think we all know what partnership means. It's working together, not as a superior or expert and the subordinate. This is working on equal ground. We're trying to build a partnership in implementing the change. Something you can ask yourself, are you trying to become more of a partner with this person? Acceptance. So what this one means in this setting is we can't force someone to change, we can only influence. Acceptance is accepting where they are at right now and meeting them there. It doesn't necessarily mean we accept certain behaviors and say it's okay, but we must accept that this is where they're at right now and we try to meet them there. An example would be if you want to get someone to run a marathon and they're only able to run a 5K right now, you're not going to go to them and say, okay, let's get going. We're going to run a marathon tomorrow. That's not where they're at. You're going to say, hey, let's work on maybe a 10K for the next step, because you're meeting them where they're at. You're accepting where they are at. Compassion, pretty self-explanatory. It's difficult to influence if we can't feel compassion. It's hard to influence without empathy. So a question you can ask yourself is, are you trying to build empathy or compassion or connection with them by doing this? And then the last one is evocation. So evocation means, in a sense, it's evoking them to use their own agency. So getting them involved in finding the solutions, not just using that writing reflex to tell them what to do. It's avoiding the writing reflex. You're helping them to evoke their own creativity and ability to problem solve. And you're avoiding that urge to dictate how they may make the change or the details of the change. So a question you could ask yourself for this one is, are you trying to help them take ownership of the solution? So remember, when you're practicing motivational interviewing, stop and ask yourself often if you're truly trying to embody these values. Because if you are, you're going to be successful. If you're not, it could actually be more detrimental. All right, so let's jump into these 4 tools. So these are the foundational skills of motivational interviewing, or tools. And again, we have another acronym to remember these. We love our acronyms. So for this one, it is OARS. O stands for open-ended questions. A is affirmations. R is reflections or reflective listening. And S is summaries. I'm going to go through each one and explain what they are. I'm going to give a warning though. They may seem really easy or simple, and you may be like, hey, this isn't that hard. Like I do this all the time. They're actually pretty difficult to use, and to use them well and in the right settings. They require a lot of practice. And so that's why I recommend you to attend one of our upcoming intersessions where we're going to focus on these 4 skills and practicing them and applying them in different scenarios. So the first one is open-ended questions. There's 2 main kinds of questions, open-ended and closed-ended questions. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this concept. Open-ended questions, they seek collaboration. Closed-ended questions ask for a yes, a no, a date, a time, a place, a number, something like that, something that can be answered in one word. Open-ended questions are really important when you engage others because they create collaboration. If we go back to that example that Nafi read, in that second method, I think they started with 4 open-ended questions to really get an idea of where this person is at. Where are they on that where are they in the boat? Are they more towards the right in the red? Are they more towards the blue? So that we can understand what they're feeling and where they are in terms of that change talk. What's really helpful about open-ended questions is you can really guide someone by what you ask for. So when you ask for change talk versus sustained talk, then you're more likely going to get answers reflecting change talk. And the more people speak change, the more willing they are to change. There's research that has shown that. The more people talk about changing, the more likely they are to changing. So if you can ask open-ended questions that promote change, it's going to be more likely that they're going to want to change. So an example might be, what are some potential advantages of this change that you can see? Started with what? It's an open-ended question. You can't just answer that with a yes or no, and it's going to help you see where they're at in this process. Open-ended questions are great. However, I want to give a couple caveats. If we ask them filled with judgment, they will backfire. And we're breaking that heart of servant leadership, that pace, partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. One other thing to keep in mind is asking open-ended questions can sometimes come across in a way that causes others to get defensive. So sometimes we need to add a qualifying statement, which is a statement that we add before we ask the open-ended question that tells them the why of why we are asking. So when we ask an open-ended question like, what are you going to do to get the report done? That could come across as negative and judgmental. And humans, naturally, we will fill in the unknown, we'll fill in the unsaid with negative, paranoid thoughts if we don't make clear our intentions. So instead of just asking that question of what are you going to do to get the report done, you could say, I would like to learn from you on your steps on getting the report completed. Tell me about the steps you plan on taking. And that's going to remove that error, that room for error, where people will interpret, and we naturally take the negative interpretation. These are really simple things, but they definitely do make a huge difference. I do want to give a quick example of this that I saw in my life. So recently, I was writing up a report. It was actually my first time writing the report. There was a certain thing that I wasn't sure if I was supposed to put in it or not. So I Teams messaged someone and I said, hey, when you wrote that report a week ago, which was a similar one, did you put in this one aspect? And they responded and they said, no, I didn't. And I was like, okay, sweet, thanks. And then I kept writing my report. An hour later, that colleague called me and they were like, hey, I'm so sorry to bother you, but like, I've just been racking my brain and stressing out, just wondering if I did something wrong. And if I should have put in that part that you asked me about, and like maybe that's why you asked, is I should have put that in and I didn't, and now like it's not correct. And I was like, oh no, oh, I am so sorry. Like that was not at all my intention. I was just, and I told this person I was just writing this report for the first time, and I didn't really know if I was supposed to put this in or not. And I know you've written a lot of them, so I was just asking to see if I should put it in or not. But because I didn't give that qualifying statement, there was room for interpretation. And that led to an hour of that employee stressing out and being worried that they had done something wrong. And so by giving those qualifiers, and no, Nafi, this was not you. By giving those qualifiers, it would have saved so much time and just would have made a better experience for that employee. All right, so open versus closed-ended questions. I want to talk just a little bit more about this. When we work with individuals to develop their open-ended questions, it often helps to start with learning how to listen for closed-ended questions, because we, by habit, ask closed-ended questions more than we think. If we can tune our ears to hear for closed-ended questions, then we can start to change and ask more open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions always start with have, can, did, would, could, are, will, is, and when. If a question starts with one of those words, it's guaranteed that it's a closed-ended question. You don't even have to listen to the rest of the question. It's closed-ended. An example of asking a closed-ended question when thinking you're asking an open-ended question would be, will you tell me your process for writing that report? I may think, and I do this all the time, that's why I'm bringing this up. I may think that I'm asking them an open-ended question to tell me the process for writing that report, but I actually just said, will you tell me? And they could just be like, yeah, I'll tell you. Or no, I won't. So technically it was just a closed-ended question. What you could say is, please tell me your process for writing that report, or what is your process for writing that report? I do want to emphasize that closed-ended questions are not bad. They have a purpose. The key, though, is understanding the purpose of open versus closed-ended questions. If all you need is a yes or a no or a date or a number, of course, use a closed-ended question. But if you're trying to guide someone through change and you're trying to promote collaboration, you're trying to promote engagement, those open-ended questions are going to be much more effective. All right, foundational skill number 2. And this was the one that Nafi pointed out in that example, is affirmations. An affirmation is a positive statement. It's a way that you can coach and build up other people, orienting them to their strengths and providing that positive reinforcement. So affirmations are so important in terms of promoting change talk and helping guide others through change, because they can help you build connection, they can reinforce commitment, and they can help guide the conversation. So when you use affirmations to guide change, you want to listen for things that matter to them. Ask those open-ended questions and then listen to what matters to them and behaviors or actions that they are doing that you want to continue. If they express attitudes or behaviors or actions that you're like, yes, that's what I want to continue, then positively reinforce that through an affirmation. Provide an affirmation to help them see that, yeah, you support them in this, and they actually are already on their way to making this change. An example might be like we saw that example earlier, but another example might be, I can hear that it's really important for you to provide a high quality product. I appreciate that you have that commitment to high quality. I think it's one of your greatest strengths. It's a simple, positive statement that helps orient people towards their strengths and can help guide that conversation to behaviors that you want to continue. The key, though, with affirmations, this is our caveat, is that they must be genuine. Okay? If they are not genuine, they can actually cause more damage than good. Affirmations are not good job, great job, attaboy, just that cheerleading. They need to be genuine, they need to be real, they need to be specific. And when you give those true affirmations, that is what can really help guide others through change. All right. Foundational skill number 3, and this is the powerhouse in the motivational interviewing world, reflections. And they are the powerhouse for a few different reasons. First off, according to research, they evoke more change talk than any of the skills we talk about in OARS. Change talk is so important, and like I've said before, it's a predictor of change. The more someone speaks their change talk, the more likely they will engage in some level of change. Reflections help people evoke change talk. They also can convey an affirmation. They can express empathy. They can help people feel heard. They can clarify misunderstandings and bridge communication gaps. And depending on what we reflect, we can gently guide the conversation when using them. A key with reflections is they are statements, they are not questions. If someone tells me that they have a headache, and I respond by saying, you have a headache, my voice goes down. I've now reflected. But if I say, you have a headache, that's now a question, right? I'm asking them, I'm saying, you have a headache? That's a closed-ended question that they can answer with yes or no. That's not a reflection. So you want to make sure when you're giving these reflections, you're making it a statement. And we'll talk a little bit about simple and complex reflections. So there's 2 main types of these reflections. There's simple and complex. Simple is when we just repeat back what someone said. We rephrase it to put it in our own words, but we don't add anything new to the conversation. So if someone tells me they have a headache and I say, your head hurts, it's a simple reflection. I'm just stating back what they said. It may seem weird when you first start to just repeat back what people say to you, but simple reflections are actually really great to let people know you hear them or to make sure you heard them correctly. People will usually pretty naturally say, yeah, exactly, and then they'll continue on. And it will be almost you giving them permission to continue on and to go deeper. Or if your reflection is not what they meant, then they'll just correct your misunderstanding. The caveat here is if we use them too much. When you use simple reflections too much, you start to sound like a parrot. And that can get real annoying really fast. So do not overdo these. What we really want to move towards is complex reflections. These are the ones that can really drive change and can guide a conversation. Complex reflections, they reflect emotions, they reflect feelings, they reflect values, meaning, where someone's headed. They can be metaphors, they can be similes, they can take that conversation deeper. However, they can also be more difficult to use or develop, and it definitely takes some practice to get good at using them. An example of a complex reflection would be, you're worried about starting this new process because you feel like the team just got caught up and a new process might set you back again. So the reason that's a complex reflection is because I'm restating back what they told me, but I'm adding some of my own interpretation into it. I'm saying that they feel like the team just got caught up, and so they're worried because they don't want to get set back again. That's not exactly what they may have said to me, but it's adding some of my own interpretation to help guide the conversation. And that's what I mean by these are like the powerhouse of motivational interviewing. Complex reflections can really be a superpower because based on what you reflect back, you can really guide that conversation. Lastly, again, remember, you have to have that underlying PACE values, partnership, acceptance, compassion, evocation as your motivation, or this, especially these complex reflections, can very quickly become manipulation. All right, our last of the 4 foundational skills, summary statements. So summary statements are pretty simple. When we want to refocus the conversation or transition the conversation, it might be from moving from discussing the topic to planning or to change topics, we can use a summary statement. A summary statement is basically just 2 to 3 reflections pulled from the conversation that you've been having, and sometimes end with an open-ended question or a plan for action. When we pull the reflections together, it's kind of like picking the best flowers from a field of flowers. We're wanting the most pertinent parts of the conversation to guide it forward. So an example of a summary statement might be, you see that this change is necessary, but you are worried we are jumping into it too soon and it could set us back. You really care about the quality of our work and don't want it to suffer because of starting this process when we aren't ready. Think about some ways we could address this concern, and I will too, and we can talk about it next Thursday. So you can see I took a couple reflections from the conversation that we had, put it together, packaged it up in a nice little summary statement, and then ended it with what we're going to go do and how we're going to transition out of that conversation. So there you have it. That's it. That's the 4 foundational skills for motivational interviewing. I know they seem simple. They're a lot harder to put into practice, but when using them correctly, you really can guide people through change. I know this was also a quick overview of these skills. The key here is that these skills are not a script. Sometimes people think that you just need to ask an open-ended question, then provide an affirmation, then provide a reflection, then a summary statement, and you're good. That's not what this is. These are tools that should be strategically embedded into conversations with the right underlying values, PACE. And when done well and done strategically with the right motivation, it can be really powerful. The key here is that it's a practice. It's a practice because everyone can always improve at these skills, and it requires practice to get good at it. And that's why, again, I want to invite you all to please sign up for that intersession. We have 3 intersessions coming up where we're going to further dive into these 4 skills and practice them. I'm going to really quickly to kind of give you an example, one more example of how you can put all these things together. Nafi and I are going to read a quick scenario. I want you to, as we read it, just see if you can kind of pick out open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summary statements within this scenario. So Nafi, are you ready to go?
Give me 1 second, Bryce. I just realized that was on the packet.
No worries. So in this scenario, I'm going to be the supervisor, and I'm going to be talking with Nafi about a new project or a new program that we just implemented.
Sorry, I'm ready.
All right. Okay. So Nafi, what are your thoughts so far with the new program?
Honestly, I think it's. Oop, am I echoing?
No, you're good.
Okay. So honestly, I think it's only doubled our work with no real added benefit.
So far, you're questioning if it's even a valuable program.
Yeah, it really hasn't been. I know you were really hoping it would be, but I'm willing to give it another try.
You're a bit deflated by the program, and with recognizing it isn't working too well, you're interested in revisiting to see if we can turn the boat around.
Yeah, that would be great if we could hit the restart button and apply what we've learned so far.
Wonderful. You've seen the program as is, doesn't work. You recognize it needs to be modified if we want to get the outcomes we want, and you're on board with doing a restart. What do you see as our next steps to get that going? So very simple. And obviously, we were reading a script, so it was not super realistic. But you can see in that example, open-ended questions, reflections. Yeah, exactly. It takes practice. I'm not even great at it. Like, it takes practice, and I've done this a lot. But what happens is when you really do this, it really does help people recognize their internal motivation, and it takes away some of that resistance and increases some of that engagement. Thanks, Nafi, for helping with that. So that is what we've got today for the lecture. I'm going to take some time right now to answer questions people may have. And then we are going to hand it over to Nafi to just talk a little bit about this new seed structure and the intersessions in a minute. But right now, if anyone would like to, I think cameras and microphones can people come off microphone? I don't know if they
No,
can.
it's been disabled.
Okay,
so they
so
can
if
just
you
type
have
anything in the chat. Mhm.
Perfect. Yep. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat and we'll go from there.
And I don't see any questions, but if we do, Bryce, I can always send them to you.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, and if people think of questions and put them in as we close up here, then we can talk about it. So Nafi, I'm gonna just say thank you all for your participation today. I really do love this topic, and I found it to be really valuable in many different situations, and just invite you to come to these intersessions where we can dive deeper into it. And I'm gonna hand it over to Nafi to talk a little bit about those intersessions.
Awesome. We can go to the next slide, please. So as you all may or may not be aware, I sent out an email here before the new year, talking about the new seeds restructure. Yep, can we go back one more? Yep, perfect, right here. So again, we have listened to your requests. We surveyed. This is just the beginning, so we really want to make sure that these seeds lectures are structured to what you all want to hear. So one of the main feedback that we heard last year or last fiscal year was that we just give a lecture, but we don't talk about or follow up or do any application piece. So that is the intersessions that we are going to start providing every month after this main lecture, which you all attended. So as you see on here, if you want to further explore what Dr. Olsen's topic was about, he'll have 3 intersessions. So here's the steps on how to, yes, thank you for clap it up. Yes, we are trying, guys. And mind you, this is a trial. So let's hope that everything goes well. So again, your feedback is always appreciated. So those of you that attended this live lecture, at the end of today, you should get credit on your TMS. And then you're going to be able to register for an intersession by searching the TMS numbers in the library. So you're going to get the TMS numbers from me when I send that email out that tells you, thank you for attending today's SEEDS lecture. I often attach the SEEDS slides. So you have those for reference. And then I'm going to list the TMS numbers. Now, every intersession is not open to everybody. So for Bryce's lecture for today, he has 3 intersessions, one that is tailored to non-supervisory employees. So that's the individual contributors. We have one that's designated for managers, so your GS 13 through 14s, and then we have the senior leaders, which are your 15 and above. So he'll have 3 sessions and only a 25 participant cap for each. So again, if you want to participate in that, as soon as you get the email from me, I encourage you to look up those numbers and secure your spot, because we're only doing 25, so that way it can be meaningful and intimate, okay? So again, if you're a person that in the future did not attend the live lecture and you went back and watched the recording, you just watch it, self-certify, and then again, you'll get that email that'll tell you you can sign up for the intersessions that'll come from me, okay? So again, this is our first rodeo with this. We're looking to continue to improve SEED. So again, your contribution and your surveys, and I thank anybody on here who took the time to write down what you're expecting to see in this future SEEDS restructure. We are definitely listening to you all as our customers, so we're excited for this new revamp. So again, if you want to be a part of these intersessions, again, look out for the email I'm going to send out here before close of business with the information on how to sign up for the intersessions. And with that, I'm going to just pause and see, do we have any comments in the chat or any questions? Yes, and keep in mind, future SEEDS lectures won't just be open to just managers. It might mix. There is a session that we're going to do in March that is open to non-supervisories. So anybody who is not a supervisor can sit in that intersession just to engage that crowd. And we want to keep it separate, right? I feel like a lot of times when we have each group separate, more information comes out, more engagement. So that's that reasoning behind separating supervisors from non-supervisors. Awesome. So I'm seeing thank you. Awesome. So again, give it some time. You'll get your credit today for today's session, and then my email will come out following that. If you don't get an email from me, again, please reach out to me. I am available to you all to help correct any errors that we might have made, okay? So again, thank you all for attending. I'm going to pass it over to Crystal to do our closeout. And again, in that survey, number 9, when it asks you other, please put in whatever you might want to see in the future for seeds. That is that section for you to really give us that information on what you want to see, what's applicable to what you all do in the field, right? We don't want to make up topics. We want to really gear them towards what you all want to see. So use that space today in that survey on question number 9 to really tell me what you want to do, what you want to hear, what you want to see. We're excited. So I'm going to pass it over to Crystal. And again, thank you all for attending today. And I'm looking forward to a successful new year with you all. Thank you.